Welcome back everybody to Huobi Global Live. My name is Darko, your host this evening, and tonight we are joined by Joseph Armenio, Foundation Director of Ergo. Joseph, welcome to the stream, welcome to the show. How are you feeling this fine evening, morning, depending which part of the world you're in?
It's early morning here, Darko, but I'm happy to have a discussion with you, talk about Ergo.
Yes, and many other things as well, apparently. So, very excited stuff. Everybody who's watching in the official Huobi Global app, please smash that like button. Join in on the live chat box. Let us know which country you are watching from. And there will be Ergo airdrops during this stream as well. I just got told that like a few seconds ago, literally. So, there's a surprise for everybody watching via the official Huobi Global app. So, Joseph, just to start off with, could you please give us a bit of background on yourself and tell us how you got into crypto and why?
Sure. So my name is Joseph Armenio. I'm a Ergo Foundation member. I've been in and around the crypto industry for quite a while. I've always been fascinated by this idea that you can spin up a global computer network and transfer value between people trustlessly, right? Because so much of the world has, barriers of entry that simply make it difficult to transact, to do business, to, even sometimes send money across borders to family or simply create opportunity, right? Because ultimately, liquidity does create the ability to have opportunity, to invest, to build something for yourself. And so this idea that we can spin up a global network that allows people to do that trustlessly and without permission, I've just found fascinating in terms of the potential implications and benefits that could bring to humans as a whole.
So how long ago would you say you entered the space, roughly?
2013, 2014.
2014, so you're one of the OGs.
I've been in and around it. I wasn't necessarily working in the space, but yeah, it's a fascinating idea, right? The concept itself, it's shown to be pretty disruptive. I mean, here we are today, right?
And a lot has happened and changed since 2014 too. You would have seen a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot of companies grow and a lot of brands collapse as well.
Yeah, and a lot of ideas, a lot of experiments, a lot of nonsense. And, certainly, things tend to have their own seasons or cycles, but I think at the end of the day, time shows good designs, right? You can never cheat that in life. Like a good idea will stand the test of time, and that's ultimately why the industry is still here, because it's based on a good idea.
So you would have been around then when the Bitcoin Talk Forum was thriving back in the day. Yeah. Awesome. Well, having said that, and as a foundation director as well of Ergo, could you maybe, for the people who don't know Ergo, could you maybe give us an introduction to Ergo and tell us a bit about what Ergo is all about?
Sure. So Ergo is a layer one mainnet. It is proof of work based. Most people would probably draw the greatest similarity to Ethereum, meaning we have smart contract capabilities. We have a global network of miners that work to create consensus. And what is Ergo all about? Well, two things primarily. The first is a low barrier of entry. If you're going to have this global computer network, right, you need people to be able to participate without having high input costs. Because if you look at the global population, whether it's internet speed, computational power, hardware power, there's a ton of, let's say, uneven distribution, right? And so if we had a network that, was super high capacity, super high performance, we're naturally going to force only people in developed areas to participate. Versus if we have lower barriers of entry, an example, you can mine Ergo currently with a 4 gigabyte graphic card.
Really?
Which is quite, old, right? But what is the benefit of that? Well, it's had time to be distributed across the globe, and so you have a larger set of normal actors. And that ability to have a low barrier of entry is what brings in the average person. And ultimately, like the average person in the world is going to benefit from having access to a open financial system across the globe, this open computer network. If you go to a developed world, there's already a ton of options. They already exist. There's already liquidity. You can already get loans. You can already interact in the financial system versus having the ability to, access any potential consumer globally with that low barrier of entry opens the market. And I think that ultimately that's what's important if we want to really drive value in a global way with a global network.
Nice.
Now, in terms of the smart contract capabilities of Ergo,
I was going to ask you that. Yep.
Sure, it's a little bit different than Ethereum, actually. In a way, smart contract is kind of it's kind of a poor way to put it. Like in Ethereum, you code the entire logic, in one kind of event, and then it processes on chain, right? Ergo is extended UTXO, which means it's box-based, is the simplest way to put it. Yep. So if you look at how smart contracts work on Ergo, it's a series of boxes, right? To where you move into a box and you have a series of checks or verifications. And if that compiles as true, you go to the next step. And if that compiles as true, you go to the next step. So it's much more functional in terms of its layout. It's almost like a series of rooms where if you can clear each particular point, at the end, you ultimately get where you're headed versus, having all of your logic in one place. And if it processes and it works, it's good. If not, potentially you have problems. So we built it that way due to kind of the simplicity of assumptions you need to make in terms of what's happening.
So having it designed this way, step by step, as you said, would that have an impact on the scalability? Because it sounds like it might have a positive impact in terms of scalability. Or am I missing something?
No. One of the things that is different between Ergo and Ethereum is gas, right? I think everybody that has used Ethereum when times are busy has seen that the gas fees tend to make that barrier of entry. It certainly works for whales and people in large positions, right? But if we're talking about the average person out there talking, hey, you want to spend a couple $100 for a transaction, that's a lot of money.
Especially that's a lot of money. If you want to send $20 to someone and it costs you $500 to send it. It's like, what's the point?
It breaks down in terms of having the average user be able to access and use these tools. So Ergo does have computational costs, but we don't have a gas fee, right? We don't need it because most of the verifications that are, you go into a room, right? The box.
Yeah.
Have a series of conditions that need to be met and verified before you can advance, so to speak. That verification happens off chain instead of on chain.
So when you say box, you mean like a block? Is that correct?
No, yeah, like a UTXO. Yeah. So if you want to understand UTXO, Ergo is kind of like Bitcoin. And what a UTXO is it's like a one-time custom banknote. So where if I need to pay you $17, for lack of a better word, let's say I have 20, I create a $17 bill that you receive, and then I receive.
I missed the last thing you said. The microphone cut out, and then you receive
change.
Yeah.
And so what Ergo does is it allows us to create spending conditions around, okay, I have this, custom note, and in order to spend it, I need to meet certain conditions. And those conditions are programmable. So we use that in kind of a linear form and sometimes even in different patterns, but to create logic, to create smart contracts or let's say custom events.
Well, you speak of proof of work just moments ago. So can you provide a quick explanation to the audience for the people who don't know and aren't aware of what a proof of work consensus is?
Sure. So proof of work is based on computational power. A simple way that people can kind of visualize that has to do with the lottery, right? You're continually crunching through numbers looking for a winning lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of like a economic comparison that people can look at in the real world, it's almost like resource extraction, right? If you drill for some oil, right? First, you have to pick a spot. You have the hardware costs of, trying to discover that reserve of whatever resource that is. And then you have to have work to get there. Now, the reality is you may or may not hit something in the end, right? There's been a ton of people that drill or dig and, ultimately they come up dry.
Like gold mining.
Exactly. It's kind of like gold mining. Now, you have miners all around the world that are continuously mining, and when they hit a block, they receive some of the ERG that's released, right? Now, in proof of stake, it's more like corporate governance, where you have, shares in a company, and over time, you're distributed more shares based on your, let's say, position holding those shares. So there's a lot of differences in terms of input costs, governance. I think, both have a future. Both are kind of interesting. The nice thing about proof of work, in my opinion, is that it tends to allow people to invest passively, meaning you have a computer most likely, right?
I think so.
If you're talking about a computer with 4 gigabytes of memory, that's really not that much of a barrier of entry. So
when you say 4 gigabytes of memory, you're talking about VGA styles, yeah? Like video card wise. Yeah.
So if you have a graphics card that's 4 gigabytes, you can mine Ergo. And the amounts of machines out there that at least overcome that first hurdle is huge. Versus, if you're trying to, let's say, invest or take part in a different network, a lot of the times you need exchange access, which means you need banking infrastructure, which means, you then have to take money and transfer it and then go buy something, which is great, right? But if you're looking at it on a global level, for some people, that's quite difficult, right? There's a ton of people out there that are unbanked or don't have a lot of liquidity, but they have a computer, right? So it allows people to kind of get into the crypto space without needing money up front to do so. True.
So with the minimum requirement of 4 gigabyte, is that the minimum requirement?
It shifts over time, but the goal in its design is to continually, like at some point it'll be 6, right? And that'll be a couple of years. But if we look at the progression of technology, you can look at your phone as an example. The processing and storage and just power of devices is, accelerating quite rapidly. So, if we can kind of advance, but also give time for technology to be distributed, we're going to try to keep the barrier of entry low to where the average person around the world can meet the computational requirements of the network.
I have an 11 gigabyte graphics card. That should be decent for it. Yeah?
Yeah, more than good.
More than good. I'm going to check this out after the stream. Very nice. So now we did speak about proof of work consensus and what it is. Is there anything else you wish to add before we get into the differences with Ergo platform and others in the industry?
No, let's get into that.
All right, cool. So there are a number of proof of work protocols in the industry, as mentioned. So what differences does the Ergo platform have from others in the industry, so to speak?
Sure. The first thing is that it's custom built, right? It was built with open source tooling that started in 2015, 2016.
Oh, wow.
So in order to build a blockchain, Ergo actually built the tooling to build and test blockchains. That was step one before we even had a network. Then we built an application to test cryptography on top of blockchains. Can give us some pretty unique functionality. And so if you look at the progression of that, number one, it's always been open source, but it's kind of like building the manufacturing tools before we actually built a project. If you look at a lot of stuff out there, a lot of things are just forked. Like if on proof of work, it's like, we have Bitcoin and then we have 100 other Bitcoins and then we have Ethereum and now we're going to get a couple more Ethereums and there's not a lot of custom forethought It's more like tweaking an existing system.
That's true.
And so we were designed from the ground up for a specific purpose, right? That's kind of always been the goal of the network. So,
You're original.
yeah, it's original, and there's actually formal papers out there that we came out with. An example, smart contracts and extended UTXO. That has our founder's name on it. That's an academic paper that goes through the logic of how our system works. So there's a lot of not only custom implementation, but kind of the research side has been pretty strong to back up the how and the why of our network and why it's structured the way it is. The second is we have some unique abilities to create compression techniques. One of which is called NepoPals. That's a silly word. It sounds like Superman.
Say that again. Say that again.
NepoPals. Non-interactive proof of works, right?
Don't even know how to pronounce that.
Yeah. It's basically a concept that came from kind of the academic research side, and what it is it's compression. It's kind of like zip files, right? I think everybody's used that on their phone where it's like you want to zip a file to compress it. Well, if we were going to have this global network, right? There's hardware costs associated with that. Yes. It's real world. Like you have to store a blockchain, right? And so if you have a blockchain that grows too quickly, guess what? You just outgrew. The average user doesn't have 2 terabytes of memory or of storage.
Yeah.
And so we always have to look at like the computational requirements, because that will take us away from having everyone be able to participate. So we have a couple of compression techniques. We have scaling solutions, which basically do the same thing. You hear a lot about layer 2s these days, and it sounds really fancy, but all it is trying to take computation and have a really small footprint on the main chain, so you don't get too much growth of your in terms of like storage. Now, we also support custom cryptography in the application level, which is pretty unique. I'm not aware of any other blockchain that does that. It's called Sigma protocols, and if you look at the E, it's the Sigma.
Nice.
Sigma protocols are basically zero knowledge proofs, which is a fancy way of using math to use a verifier and basically share information without needing to trust or transmit data. We have governance that's built into the chain to where, if you look at why there's 100 Bitcoins, it's because, well, there's no governance, right? So somebody has an idea, let's move the network and have bigger blocks, right? And then there's a civil war. Now you have 2 competing projects, and then somebody else comes up with an idea and things kind of fragment. Yeah. But we actually have miner governance plugged in to where miners actively have the ability to vote and have independent power over a variety of network parameters. And I think one thing that's ultimately big but hard is fair distribution, meaning we started the network from zero, right? Turned it on from zero, had to grow organically. There was no, pre-mine that went to one organization. It was kind of launched Bitcoin style, which in today's market is, it's painful. But the reality of doing that is it also allows us organic growth in a community of people that have been with us since day one.
So on the topic of proof of work consensus, just really quickly, the Ethereum merge, impressed, not impressed, or no comment?
In terms of the merge, well, number one, that's been their plan, right? It's not my plan, it's their plan, okay? So in terms of like their own success and their own ideas, I wish them well, right? I don't have any hard feelings towards them. I think they've done some good things for crypto. The first is their development community has been very strongly open source. That's something that Ergo very much advocates, because Well, it allows clear assumptions and it also removes barriers, right? That's kind of changing in the Ethereum community, which is a little sad to see, but there's still that ethos pretty strong, right? And I respect that a lot. The second thing is, miners from Ethereum did help a lot in terms of building their network. They participated in DeFi. They did actually create a lot of value there that, they kind of never got respect for because I'm just going to say had a bad design that had gas fees that, if you're trying to send $20 and it costs 500, you're going to be a little upset, right? And who got the blame for that? The miners, right? But they didn't really create that system. They just tried to, interact and profit from it.
They just mined it. That was it.
Exactly. They mined it, and the economic incentive is make as much as you can mining. So why not? Like
That's true.
I have no hard feelings, but this week we had the merge. So all of those miners, basically were kicked out of that network. We picked up a lot in Ergo, but we still have a bit to grow to support them. But that's certainly a goal because having, that hardware security certainly, let's say, incentivize development and put Ethereum where it is long term. I think that, that level of participation in the mining community, huge part of that.
And with having some of those miners move over to Ergo, I mean, that's positive. That's welcome.
That's massive. Every miner is a user, right? They need a wallet.
Yeah.
Every miner is, going to get a little curious, hopefully, and learn a little bit about the ecosystem. And, we have educational tools that the community naturally came out with. That's like free college. How does Ergo work? How do you understand it from both a layman's perspective? How do you build on it? We've actually been pushing pretty hard for free and open education about Ergo, because then the community members understand what they're doing. Potentially they understand how to understand the system, how things work, and maybe potentially even build on it. We've actually seen a couple of people go from green, never been really a computer developer, to learning about it and actually building some stuff, which
That's
is
awesome.
It's amazing to see that.
That is awesome. So you did mention earlier that the miners can get involved in the whole governance system, but governance can be difficult in decentralized systems. So how does Ergo address the topic of governance on the platform?
Sure. So number one, the first thing that's needed for fair governance is the core team needs to be out of the way, right? Wow. That was the problem. That was the problem with Ethereum, is it was very much like a plutocracy, or even, kind of like the king of the network telling everyone else what to do, right?
This was not the answer I was expecting to hear, but please go on.
Sure. So what happens with voting in Ergo is miners have the ability to vote from their nodes, right? I can't stop that. I can't censor their vote. And when we started, they had 12 adjustments they could make, including block size, transaction fees, all of the things that potentially could affect their business. They need the ability to change because they're running a business, right? Like if you're running a small business, you need the ability to adjust your costs based on the supply side. That's, I think very just common sense oriented. Like if you were selling something and your input costs go up, what happens? You either stomach that or you pass that on to, your users, right?
Just like the banks with the interest rate rises, they pass them on to their clients.
Yeah, and if you had a shop and suddenly everything you're selling goes up, either you're going to eat the loss or you're going to need to pass it on to survive, right?
Yeah.
But you as a business owner need the ability to have some flexibility with cost control to adapt, right? And, every business in the world has to find some balance between how much are you going to charge and what can your, clientele pay, right? That's the kind of choice everybody has to make. So what did we do? We gave that to the operators of the network and said, it's you guys suffer the input costs. You guys are the ones that need to be able to make decisions, right? And so, over time they found that balance. Now, in order to prevent the messiness of governance, if you want to pass something on the network, it needs to pass at a super majority, 90%, which if you look at governance in the world, if you needed 90% threshold to make change, nothing would get done, right?
Yeah.
That does really force people to come together, have conversations, and find common solutions, because it's a lot easier to clear like 50% than 90%. And what that does is, if 90% threshold is actually cleared, and there's an upgrade, the 10% most likely isn't going to fork because there's no value there. It's small. So, we sit down, we have debates. Sometimes that's clean, sometimes that's messy, but it does tend to keep the community together.
And that's what happens when people are passionate about what they do as well. They can get messy and a little bit too ambitious, but that's all part of the game in crypto. There are rules, but there are no rules, so to speak. So, having said that, what advantages do proof of work protocols have when it comes to decentralized finance?
This is something that is a good question. I would say that because miners inherit risk, right? They're the ones that are, quote unquote, drilling for oil or digging for gold, and they might not hit it, right? What does that mean? It means that when a coin that's proof of work oriented is created, it creates a zero rate market. So if you were a miner and you hit a ERG, right? You're not going to naturally just make more ERG because you have one, right? You get a 0% return, which, most people are like, wait, I don't want a 0% return. I want to create some mechanism of, growth, right? Well, we have the ability to create that market for growth on top of the network, versus if you have a coin that uses, kind of the inflation of the network to, let's say you have a token or coin and you naturally get 5%, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to create a DeFi protocol, I now have to compete with that number, right? So if I can't beat the inflation rate or the rate of return that the network is offering, there's no point for me to exist. Somebody can just hold that coin or token, and they're naturally going to benefit from the inflation of the protocol. So if I can't beat, let's say 5%, there's no point, nobody's going to use it. They can do nothing and have a 5% return. Now, if you look at it from like a standard economic investment perspective, 5% return is pretty good, right? That's hard to do. Like if I could go out and, offer a 5% return all day, every day in the real world, people would flock to me.
Oh yeah, well the banks themselves are offering less than 1% interest these days. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what happens is, when you have a internal inflation rate that everyone that's building needs to compete with, they have to be risky to outperform it. Because if they can't outperform it, they shouldn't exist. But if you're going to say, okay, I need to create a 6% return from day one, how do you build a business in that environment that's actually organic and doesn't have a lot of built-in risks or liabilities or kind of things in the back end that may not, we've seen a lot of token inflation where, it's like you get these crazy APYs and then suddenly it bases itself and everything blows up, right?
Yeah.
And a part of it is because when you have, just say, percentage returns that you naturally need to compete with from day one to exist, how do you do that in a real organic way? Versus having a zero rate market is like, if I can create a good idea that creates a 1% return, people are going to use it because it beats zero, right? You're not competing directly with the protocol itself in terms of what you build, and you can be a lot more conservative and, build things that make a lot more sense than saying, okay, I've got to beat whatever the inflation rate is from day one. That's hard.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the whole crazy APY thing. I've personally seen projects with 1,000,000% APY, and they did not last more than a week, these projects.
Well, this is the thing I like to tell our community, right? If you can outperform like the riskiest businesses in the world, let's say like you're outperforming the returns of drug cartels and arms traffickers and all these things where it's like, what's the risk that creates that level of return, like jail and death? It's probably scamming. Like, it's not going to last.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone in the world would just do that and quit your job, put your money there, and then, you'll be fine for the rest of your life. Like, it's all about understanding the risks And the reality is, if you're talking about organic growth, the rates of returns are hard to create. It takes good ideas, it takes participation. And if you're actually starting from, like the ground up, that process is going to take time. So having a zero rate market is actually really important in terms of creating like organic DeFi or organic based mechanisms of creating returns versus coming into a market where you have to compete with the protocol itself, and then it's messy.
And it doesn't just take time, but it's also the expected and unexpected challenges that arise in the meantime as well, which
Exactly.
Yeah.
So miners actually absorb a lot of that risk in proof of work, which creates this clean zero rate market.
But are there any other advantages that proof of work protocols have in the DeFi sector?
Sure. I think the other mechanism has to do with real world cost, right? So if you have input costs, it does create a certain incentive not to come in at a loss because you have costs you have to carry, right? So if I mine any proof of work token has a cost of production that miners carry. And so there's a certain incentive for them to protect that because that's their business, right? If you're a small shop, you're usually not going to liquidate your inventory below what you bought it unless you're going out of business.
True. Clearance sale, so to speak.
Yeah.
So next up, outside of security, what do miners bring to a proof of work ecosystem outside of security?
Well, number one, they're all community members, right? They all will download a wallet, they start to interact, and many of them bring ideas. When you have an open source ecosystem, it's all about kind of the group mind share or like the collective knowledge, and then the ideas that are brought into that. And so miners, they're building a business. If you look at some that are on the, let's say, residential miners, they'll build their house as a mining rig. They'll have computers in their basements and fans and, all kinds of work that they put into, their life, their house in some cases.
Sounds sophisticated.
Yeah. And so they naturally have an incentive to grow and create value because that's their business, right? If you were selling products, you would want high quality products in your store. And if there's ever an issue or a, let's say, change you would like to see in the products that you sell, you have access now to, developers and the team that actually create what you're interacting with. So there's a lot of input, feedback, and participation that occurs there. And the reality is most miners are pretty technically savvy characters, right? There's a lot of miner developers, and whether it's developing smart contract or they're working with mining software itself, which that's its own animal. So there's mind share, and miners bring that.
Interesting. So is there anything else that you'd want to talk about in terms of outside of the security, or have you covered all that?
No, I would like to get into smart pooling.
Sure.
That's one of the most unique aspects of Ergo. So we can go to the gold analogy, right? Smart pooling allows mining pools to be transparent and on-chain. It actually came from a research paper that started with Ethereum, but they were never able to actually build it because it was too expensive, right? You'd have gas involved, and putting gas fees on miners like that would just never work in that model.
Yeah.
Well, because we have a different pricing model and different way of computing on Ergo, we actually took research that Ethereum did and we implemented it. And so we now have a smart pool that's on chain, and that allows for transparent voting in a more democratic way versus mining pools just being in charge. And it also allows other projects to launch via proof of work, which is really new and unique. So in a way, it's kind of like, let's say I build a token around a project, right?
Yep.
I have the ability to come to market, launching it to miners, right? And it's kind of like, instead of a miner just mining and digging for gold, now they can dig for gold and silver. And hopefully over time, as the ecosystem grows and we have more projects that are interested launching via work, you have miners that can mine a variety of different assets on top of the network. And, there's some magic in the back end in terms of swaps and paying for fees that, because we're programmable, you'll never see. But you actually already have that where, in some mining pools, you can mine a asset and then you get rewarded in Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Well, we can do that on Ergo via a smart contract with any asset on Ergo, which allows miners to be able to say, okay, I want to mine this new project or this new thing. And so it's like provides a variety of minerals that miners can mine.
So it basically creates an opportunity for diversification, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually have a project called Guap Swap that was built by miners. So, and at that point, you'll be able to mine a portfolio when they're fully out, to where you can pick multiple assets at different percentages and say, okay, I want to mine these projects. And, every time you hit a block, that swaps occurs on the back end, and actually it's like portfolio mining, which is totally different. And what does that do? It allows these projects, if we see some legal issues around proof of stake and all that, there's always noise and drums and all that nonsense. But that does create an issue for projects. They're now launching on top of the decentralized network in a decentralized way. And so as the network grows, projects, that would come onto Ergo and launch via work would be more decentralized than Ergo itself.
Okay.
We started from a little network and they're starting on top of a big network.
Interesting. That's strange. Like that's news to my ears, but yeah, you don't hear many projects that operate like this. It's very different, and as you mentioned at the start of the stream, it's original. And going by what you've said so far, it's sounding pretty damn original, that's for sure. So it's definitely something, like with the proof of work section as well, it's something I am definitely going to be looking into. From the moment you said minimum 4 gigabyte, I'm definitely going to be checking that out for sure. And is there any novel or unique features being explored for the proof of work on Ergo?
Yeah, so, we have proof of work as a consensus mechanism has, at this point over a decade of battle testing, right? And it goes back to what I said at the beginning of our conversation, is that time shows strong designs, right? Now, what magic can occur on Ergo is connecting proof of work to logic on top of the network. That's ultimately going to create a lot of unique features to where, in terms of like miner-based DeFi, you could look at Ethereum. One thing that made it very popular was MEV, right? Where you had, kind of botting and arbitrage that would give miners more fees, right? That type of thing is a lot harder to create in extended UTXO than it is in, the Ethereum model. But basically what that represented was proof of work connected with logic, right? And we have a lot of flexibility in I don't know, it's a very green area, right? It's something that I can't even fully predict all of the ways we can connect work and logic in a way that is seamless, where the user doesn't even understand like what's happening in the back end, but it just works, right? Like mining a portfolio instead of mining one coin is a good example of that. There's a ton of little ways we can connect work and logic that really will deliver a lot of value. So that's an area that as an ecosystem, we have these community events called Ergo Hacks, where, people come in, they drop ideas and, kind of connects the community, the developers and the miners, because, like our next Ergo Hack is around minting and mining. So different tools that users, miners, developers all can utilize. And we try to get like these community events where, I think this is our 5th one. And in the past, some of the winners actually were community members with no development experience, just a good idea. But, you have an open source community, you have like a forum. If you have a good idea, there's value there, right? And someone's going to see it and say, hey, this is a good idea. how do we do it? And if there's incentive there and it makes sense, a lot of times it gets built.
So this community events sound like they were well received then.
Yeah, we try to have like open discussions where any developer can even hop in and talk to the core team. Even community members can hop in and drop ideas and say, hey, can we do this? And sometimes it's, like pie in the sky ideas, but that's great. They're thinking, right?
Whatever works, yeah.
Yeah, at least they're thinking, they're in the right direction. And then, sometimes we have ideas where it's like, wow, how do we do this? And, you kind of go through the imagination, idea, implementation, engineering, testing, and then at some point, things make it through that entire gauntlet and come to market. So I like participating in a community that's that open. It's different. It's a different feeling than, having like closed source projects competing and firing shots at each other and all that fun stuff. There's a lot of drama in crypto already.
Yeah, it's good to hear that you have the community involved in that way as well. There was research conducted, couldn't tell you how many years ago, but they were basically saying that they were researching different parts of the world in terms of population and how technologically advanced they were as a society. And what the end result was that the cities with the larger populations, they had more people contributing to the ecosystem of the city and the ideas. So it wasn't about just one person come up with a good idea, but it was about a group of people as a collective coming up with these ideas that made these certain cities more advanced over other cities. So how can I compare that to crypto? For example, with Ergo, as you mentioned, you're having a lot of community getting involved with these ideas.
Open source. There's one thing that creates that. It's open source. Yeah. Open source development, open source code, open participation. It has to do with barriers, right? So where, if there's a lot of things in crypto where you cannot see the code behind it. And, that kind of blows my mind in the crypto space, just looking at like where it came from. Like how does that exist? But it does. So, as a community, we push very strong for open source tooling, open source code, and transparency. That's because awesome. if you have something that you can see into it as a whole, collectively you can trust it, and it kind of belongs to everybody. So it naturally creates that congregation where people work together versus it's kind of like I'm working with a trade secret that you can't see or understand, and then you kind of get back into like trust them. Like we shouldn't have to trust anyone's code. We should be able to see it.
Yeah, that's it.
Where Bitcoin started, right?
What you see is what you get, right?
Yeah.
That's it, and that's the way it should be. So, on that note, why do you think cryptocurrency exchanges care about supporting proof of work protocols?
That's a good question, and it's something that the industry is going to see post merge. I would say that miners, because they have costs, they're natural liquidity providers, right? They have to cover their costs, right? And so that naturally means they're going to be looking for a market. And what do exchanges want? They want users and liquidity. That's their business model. So the two do have some synergy there where, I think when Ethereum was still proof of work, which was like last week, they were bringing $25 million a day into the market, right? And some of that, sure, went into DeFi and other, potential returns, but a lot of it went to exchanges. So you had organic pressure in the markets. You had like organic delivery of coins, tokens to exchanges. And so I think that having that first point of contact that's incentivized to provide liquidity will provide value longer term, because if you go back to you hold it and you get 5%, why would you ever sell it? Yeah. And so sometimes in that staking setup, the incentives to actually provide liquidity don't really make that much sense. So you kind of have to inorganically create that versus there's an organic incentive for miners to cover costs.
I never thought of it that way. Sometimes you just need to hear it from someone else, and I never heard of it that. I never thought of it that way. Interesting the way you put it. Really interesting. So, for the foreseeable future, we can expect the cryptocurrency exchanges to keep continuing to care about proof of work protocols. Then, having said what you just said now, yeah.
If you look historically, the two largest projects, Bitcoin and Ethereum, were both proof of work.
Yeah.
And why do they tend to have volume? Because they're protected by natural liquidity providers. They have to cover costs. They have real world costs that they incur. And so there's an incentive to sell. Versus if it's something you can just hold and you benefit from holding, what happens to markets, right? It interferes with trading. You need liquidity. So having that organic incentive, I think long term is going to be one of the valuable aspects of proof of work because it helps create markets.
Nice. I like the way you put that. Very impressive indeed. Joseph, before we give this a wrap tonight, is there anything else you wish to tell the Huobi Global Live audience?
Sure. Hop onto a website called sigmaverse.io.
Sigmaverse?
Sigmaverse.io. That's kind of the phone book or directory of the Ergo ecosystem. If anybody that's building a tool or a DApp or even an NFT project, right, can get on there and kind of make a website, post it there, and be found. I think that ultimately, if you want to create a global network, you have to look at how difficult is it for you to join, and then what are the gatekeeping parameters that are in place to prevent people from just joining and doing business, right? And so that's something that at Ergo we were designed with the intent, let's try to make that as easy as possible. That way, as many people around the world as possible can use the tooling we build and ultimately benefit from them, because that's a beautiful potential with a global network. Is you have this economy that anyone anywhere in the world can interact with if they have 4 gigabytes on a video card, right? And having no permission needed and being able to use that economy, participate in that economy, hopefully delivers value to their life and ultimately their family,
Nice. So for everybody watching, to find out what exactly Joseph has been talking about during this interview, go to sigmaverse.io. Did I say that correctly? Sigmaverse.io.
Sigmaverse. Yep.
And feel free to check it out. It is free. It won't cost you anything. Just a little bit of your time. That is all. You might just learn something, or you might be impressed with something else with what you see. Nevertheless, sigmaverse.io. And can we find the socials there as well?
Sure. So one other thing I'd like to add is we have a kind of like a North Star document where, if you're creating a network, you need okay, what are we here for? We have a document called the Ergo Manifesto. It's available in 14 different languages.
Oh, wow.
And it kind of gives the part of why does Ergo exist? Why do we build this? It takes time and energy and years to create a network like this. Why do we do it? And I think having the intent or purpose known and transparent is really important for people to understand the why Ergo, because that's ultimately the energy that drove development.
And speaking of energy, one point I almost forgot to mention was for the people who do visit sigmaverse.io, you actually get 7 years good luck for visiting the website as well. So please do not hesitate to check out sigmaverse.io. You've been told. Awesome. Joseph, just quick question. Are you a gamer? Do you have time for gaming, or there's no time for gaming in your life?
I'm not that much of a gamer, to be honest.
Okay, it's a question I ask everybody on this.
I'll be honest. I have nieces, nephews that just like to pwn on me. That's about it.
And one more. Favorite food?
Favorite food. Oof. I'd have to say lamb.
Good choice. Garlic sauce?
Garlic sauce is the way to go. I'm not a mint guy.
I like your style. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us here on Huobi Global Live. Hopefully we get to see you back again in the future with some further crypto talk and maybe some news updates and announcements. Only time will tell. And a big thank you to everybody watching in the official Huobi Global app. Thank you to everybody who has smashed that like button and to everybody contributing in the live chat box. And we have 22,600 people watching so far. So big shout outs to each and every one of you from all over the world. Joseph, thank you once again. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And until next time, please be safe, be healthy, trade wise, and as always, rock on.
Thank you.